Now, of course, then you need to know, if I've installed my application, now where is it? That's always a good question. For example, say you installed ImageMagick from whatever Unix source you managed to find. Once you finish, now ImageMagick is not called on the command by typing in ImageMagick. It has a certain number of commands that it recognizes. For example, convert. You would type in convert, specify the path to the file you want to convert, and specify the path of what you want it to be. For example, folder slash image.jpg, and then folder slash image.gif. That's a very simple example. It's a basic convert from a JPEG is to give. Right? So if you type in convert and you don't do anything else, just type in convert and hit enter. What the command I will try and do is run the script, run the command to give. In this case, for example, you type in convert, it gives you loads of stuff. Okay, it comes up with all sorts of gear, basically telling you that ImageMagick was installed, which version it is, and what you should be doing, because it tells what I can't find the image file and it's done something wrong. But at least you know now that it works. That's the main thing. Or you get command not found. Now you're in trouble, because basically you've installed ImageMagick, but it says that it still can't run the convert command. And what you need to find out basically, what happens is command line applications usually get installed into a bin or a binary folder. Now the problem is that there's more than one of those on the file system. For example, it could be in /usr, /local bin, could be in user bin, could be in opt local bin, could be anywhere. There's loads of them. So you need to find out where ImageMagick was installed, and which one of these things. So that's a good question. So basically, one way to find out is, let me rephrase that. You may have to tell the system where it is. Okay, so you may have to edit a file which is in your own user file, or in the case of Lasso, it will be Lasso users folder, and you'll see something like that. Okay, basically that tells that this path here, user local bin, should be a sort of a shortcut that the command line will use to run any type of script. Is that correct? That's right, yeah. Pretty much. So you may have to add that. Now, I won't quite go into that because it's just to basically explain to you how you could find your own application when you're trying to use them from the command line. So for example, if you type in which convert and you hit enter, it will come back with the path of where it lives. So then you know that if you want to run the convert, either you have to add this line of text here to that profile file in your user folder, or you just have to specify the whole path. Okay, so instead of running convert, you run opt local bin convert. Okay, and that will then give you the commands that you're looking for. Now, it is possible that you have a command line application installed in more than one location. For example, I could download ImageMagick from its own website, install it, and it will be in user local bin. Or I could use MacPort, we'll get to it in a second, get into install and install another version in some other location, which can be useful, but it can be confusing as well. So keep in mind it might be more than one location. So the path to your application is important to remember. You have to always specify the full path when you're using Lasso, because that's what we're obviously talking about here. I will store that in a global variable. So for example, you can store it in a database and have your system declared when the site starts up, something along those lines. Make sure that you have it somewhere that can be accessed by every page that uses these command line applications. For example, ImageMagick I set on my application path to ImageMagick, and I store it in opt local bin. And that path, then I call ImageMagick, I run the shell command usually. I specify the variable path to ImageMagick, which is that, and then convert and blah blah blah, whatever I'm doing with it. So that means that it will always find ImageMagick and don't have to be remembering where it is. It also means that it can easily change it if I reinstall it somewhere else. Now, MacPort, as I mentioned earlier, is a way of installing command line application much easier. Again, it needs the Xcode tool, so you have to have that installed. Then you install the MacPorts application, which is itself a command line application, funny enough. So you basically go to the MacPorts.org website, download stuff and install it, very simple. And then when you want to install a command line application, it's very simple. You basically just type in at the terminal sudo, which basically prompts you for your root password, port, install, and then the name of the application. For example, sudo port install ffmpeg. And what that does, it will then automatically install all the files it needs to run this, so it's much easier to use than having to prepare all the stuff yourself. The only problem, what's the other problem? Here's no problem. Install dependencies, yeah. Yeah, by default it will install the applications in a different directory than the standard Mac OS 10 command line application. In this case it puts in opt local bin. The idea of that is that if you run a software update, for example, it doesn't start overwriting what you've installed, and it basically keeps it separate, so it's a much easier way to keep track of these things. So that's Mac ports. Think is another one. Very similar to Mac ports. Again, it requires the developer tools, and I've never used it, so I can't tell you what it does or how it works, but it's a very similar idea. It makes it a lot easier to install command line application. Oh yes, there was one other thing I need to say about Mac ports. This is basically run by people who take Unix applications and convert them into, something that can be installed easier to use Mac ports. So it doesn't mean that everything is on it by default. It doesn't actually install the raw raw Unix files that you may file somewhere. It actually has a whole team of developers that continuously update this stuff. So it is possible that what you want to install is not a Mac port. It takes you back to the previous set of instructions. Now, the other thing is, obviously, you're not going to just be doing something like list the directors of list the contents of the directory. Like you use that example all the time, you're probably going to be doing something far more interesting. So what you end up doing is feeding all sorts of variables that you've declared in Lasso and feed it to the shell type or the OS process type, whatever you're using. So what you do, you build a whole string, one string, with loads of variables thrown in between. For example, path to a file, and then whatever dimensions it should be creating with that, and if you're using image mappings, things like that, and what it should be called. Make sure that you leave room for spaces between the parameters. For example, if you remember the example of OS Pros where you have an array of variables, the first is ls, and the second one is -al. If you concatenate all that together as a string, then obviously it needs to have a space in between. So you have to keep that in mind when you're creating your string. So as you can see there, for example, there's a space in front of the parameter, or I can actually declare an empty space and then have my variable to make sure there's always spaces there. Spaces where there should be, and no spaces where there shouldn't be, of course. For example, if you have /user bin / and then a space and then the command convert, it's going to fail because it's trying to use a directory and then a command. So they have to be stuck together. When you're building that string, it's a very good idea to don't actually run a shell command or whatever with all these variables, but basically concatenate one string, store that in a variable, and then run your commands. So if there's something wrong, you can always just see it back and see what it is and try and run it in the terminal to find out what the problem is, where the space is, whatever it should be. And a very important part is make sure that your file paths are surrounded with quotes. Because if there's a space, then in the file, again, it will fail. And I've basically burned myself several times with that problem. But you try and work, because especially if sometimes there isn't a space and it works fine. Sometimes there is a space. And just try and work out what happens. So always have quotes around file paths. For example, in this case, we set up a